George likes his chicken spicy.
Spice up your life!
Spicy, no?
And this is the new spicy.
Welcome back to Spice, everyone. I'm joined by my friend Sean. How are you, Sean?
I'm good, thank you, Braden. Very well indeed.
What is your title here?
It's pretty long. So I'm the head of Pilgrim Theological College, which means I'm the principal there. And I'm also the director of the Education and Formation for Leadership stream within the Synod. So it basically means that I head up the work of education that happens here.
Awesome. So you qualified for what we're about to talk about?
I think so, because not only am I kind of in the world of theological education, but I'm also a biblical scholar by training. So teaching the Bible, learning about the Bible has been the thing that's kind of driven me into this world and into this position.
Awesome. Great. And that's what we're talking about today. Part of our Bible studies and devotion series around what are we trying to do, what's happening when we are teaching the scriptures, and do you want to start by what are some of the responsibilities or some of the things we should be aware of when we are preparing devotions or maybe sermons or Bible studies with young people?
I think Bible study in particular, and maybe devotions as well in a different way, has a particular kind of role. It's not the same thing as preaching a sermon or giving a lecture or kind of sharing your own wisdom or opinions without any reference to the people who are actually there in the room with you. I think the fundamental responsibility for a Bible study leader is to really do whatever it is that helps the people engage with the text of the Bible itself. Yep. And what that might mean is that you may have your own opinions, you may think you know what an answer to a question is, but you're not the first person to do that, because what you actually want people to do is not to relate to you and your opinions and answers, but really to relate to the text. Yeah. So that in community you're actually learning and reading and understanding and discerning together on the basis of reading the text together.
Awesome. And so I guess for people watching along, with all that experience and your training and stuff, do you want to? How might we add some spice to what we're doing there? Have you got any ideas or suggestions?
There are lots of ways in which I think you can make Bible study more interesting than sometimes it can be. It can be sometimes people can engage with it out of a sense of duty or discipline rather than genuine enjoyment. And maybe the first thing to say is I think Bible study should always move beyond the simple dynamics in which, there's a question and what you're looking for is the right answer somewhere. And so, either the leader has got the right answer or someone who's read a book has got the right answer or something along those lines. What you're after is a process of exploration together, which is not to say that there aren't good or bad ways of reading or understanding the biblical text. There are. But genuine engagement comes when people really feel that they're exploring that for themselves with others. Yeah. So I think there are some basic things that you can do to make that happen. The first is to make sure that when you're leading Bible study, you're prepared to a certain extent yourself. Yeah. And the basic point of any engagement with the Bible is you have to actually read it, right? Yeah. You'd be surprised how often this doesn't happen. That people come to a text and someone might read it out, but then the conversation operates at the level of what we already know this text means and what we already think it's already about and what the church has already taught us it's about, rather than the genuine process of let me read this text almost as if I've read it for the first time, and let me read it closely enough and slowly enough that I'll learn how to see things that I might not have seen before, or I might get a perspective from someone else in a group that helps me to understand something that I didn't understand before. So in preparation for Bible study, you have to do a bit of that work yourself. You actually have to sit back and read carefully and slowly and make a note of what you see and make a note of what's there. So that's a really thing. Going in with presuppositions about what you want people to learn the other side of Bible study is almost always a recipe for killing it off.
Yeah, okay. That's good.
So you go there with an expectation that new things are going to come out of this process. And the second thing to say is I think curiosity is a hugely important thing. You need to be curious about what you're reading. And to be curious, you need to ask questions. Many people, of course, approach the Bible thinking that what the Bible does is give us kind of clear answers. It's a kind of guidebook or a manual of some sort. And our relationship to it is one where we basically nod and say, okay, how do we do that then? You know? Whereas in actual fact, interpretation is always about asking questions. And questions can be difficult. Questions can be, well, the Bible might say that, but my experience tells me this, so what the hell do I do about the relationship between these two worlds? Or that makes sense in the world of the Bible, you know, generations and centuries ago, but that kind of language and that way of thinking about things doesn't make sense in my own context. So how do I understand the text in the light of... So asking those kinds of questions is really important. Asking basic factual questions is important. Why did Paul write this letter? Why is it that there are two stories of creation in Genesis? Why are there... why does it say in one story about Noah's flood that the animals went in 2 by 2, and in another story it says they went in 7 by 7, right? Those are genuine questions about the text.
I'm going to have to ask that.
You did not know that?
No, I didn't.
There you go. So there are two accounts of the Noah story, and they have different numbers of animals. So, if you read closely and if you read in detail, what you get is a whole set of questions.
Yeah.
And those questions become the thing that adds spice to the way in which you engage with it.
Nice plug.
And I would say there are no questions that are out of bounds. So just because the Bible is the Bible doesn't mean that there are certain questions that are forbidden. Any question, even a question that goes something like, I think this is deeply, deeply wrong, or oppressive, or patriarchal, or morally problematic, or God seems to be behaving like an idiot in this passage, what do I do about that? Even those questions are legitimate questions to be asking about a text in order to seek deeper levels of understanding. The other thing that I think makes Bible study come alive is if you make sure that when you study the Bible and you read any biblical text, you keep the focus on God. The Bible's about a whole load of stuff, right? It's set in societies and cultures and contexts very different from our own. It's full of characters and language and ideas and history and metaphors and imagery. But the fundamental thing that the biblical texts are for is to point us to who God is in relationship to us, and how God is at work in the world. The Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann puts it in a really helpful way. He says, when you read the Bible, you should always read the Bible asking the question, how do I read this text so that I make it clear that God is the main character in this story?
Yeah.
So even if it's about David and Bathsheba, if it's about Noah and his sons, even if it's about Jesus and the disciples, how do I read the text so that I can see that God is actually the main character in that story? And then, how do I ask, that in the light of this text, how does God become the main character in my story in the light of what God is doing in this story? And that kind of focus on what God is up to in these very different, wildly diverse texts is the question that I think enlivens faith and discipleship and really enables people to get to grips with the text. The other thing, maybe just to say in passing, and there'll be a link or two maybe to this, I mean, just get informed.
Yeah.
Learn stuff, read books, ask advice, talk to someone who knows a bit more than you do, and find ways of equipping yourself to be a resource to facilitate that encounter with the text, and through the text, that encounter with God.
Sure, that's been great. I think we've heard lots of opportunities and lots of ideas to really add some spice, not only to our Bible studies, but to our own understanding of the Scriptures and God. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, good. Thanks, Braden.